A missile just landed 14 kilometers from Israel's most secret facility. The one Israel has never officially admitted exists. The one that, if hit directly, could trigger a radiological disaster across the entire Middle East. And the Israeli Prime Minister called it a difficult evening. That's it. That's the statement. Think about what that silence means. We are now in week 4 of a war that started on February 28th, when the United States and Israel launched a coordinated strike campaign against Iran, targeting its missile infrastructure, its military leadership, and its nuclear program. The goal, according to President Trump, was regime change. The method was overwhelming force, and Iran's response has been to demonstrate, systematically, that it can reach anything inside Israel, anytime it wants. But here's where it gets strange. Because the most alarming moment of this entire war wasn't the biggest explosion. It wasn't the highest casualty count. It was a missile that landed in a desert town of 40,000 people and shook the entire global nuclear order. Let's go back to Saturday night, March 21st. Earlier that day, U.S. and Israeli forces had struck Natanz, Iran's primary uranium enrichment facility, 220 kilometers southeast of Tehran. Iran's Atomic Energy Organization confirmed the strike. They said there was no radiation leak, but the message was unmistakable. The most protected nuclear site in Iran had just been hit. Again. Iran's response came hours later. Ballistic missiles streaked towards southern Israel. Israeli air defense activated. Interceptors launched. And for the first time in this conflict, in the area surrounding Israel's most sensitive strategic location, they failed. 2 missiles got through. One hit Arad, one hit Dimona. Now, if you don't know what Dimona is, you need to understand this before anything else. Dimona is not just a city. It sits 10 to 14 kilometers from the Shimon Negev Nuclear Research Center. The facility, built in secret with French assistance in the late 1950s, the facility Israel has never officially confirmed is connected to nuclear weapons. And the facility that every intelligence agency on Earth agrees is where Israel's nuclear arsenal was developed and likely maintained. Analysts estimate Israel has somewhere between 80 and 400 warheads. All of them trace back to that site in the Negev desert. Israel has one of the most sophisticated air defense architectures on the planet. Arrow for high-altitude ballistic threats, David's sling for medium range, Iron Dome for short range, layered, overlapping, battle-tested. And Iran went straight through it. The Israeli Air Force said the failures in both Dimona and Arad were not systemic, that the circumstances were unrelated, that it was essentially a coincidence both happened in the same area within 2 hours of each other. You can decide what you think about that explanation. What's not in dispute, 180 people were injured across the 2 strikes. Residential buildings were shattered. A 10-year-old boy was among the wounded. And one woman standing near a fresh crater and the remains of her home, a home just meters from the impact point, told journalists, "There is no nuclear research facility. I don't feel threatened." That's what living near a state secret does to a community. It makes the most obvious thing in the world into something nobody says out loud. But here's what makes this a turning point. Not just another strike in a long war. Before March 21st, nuclear sites were functionally off the table. Not because of any treaty. Israel isn't a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and the conflict has already blown past most conventional restraints. They were off the table because of deterrence, because both sides understood that hitting a nuclear facility directly risked consequences nobody could control. Iran just dissolved that understanding. The IAEA confirmed the nuclear research center itself was not struck. No radiation was detected. The missiles hit the city, not the reactor. But the distance, 14 kilometers, is not a miss. It's a message. A message that says, we know exactly where it is, we can reach it, and next time we may not aim for the city. Iranian state media was explicit. They framed the Dimona strikes as a direct response to the Natanz attack. Eye for an eye, nuclear site for nuclear site. A senior Iranian military source told Tasnim news agency that Tehran had shifted strategy, that proportional retaliation was over, that future responses would be broader and more damaging. Standard deterrence logic says that's a bluff. Escalate too far, and you invite total destruction. But here's the problem with that logic in 2026. The Iranian supreme leader has already been killed in a targeted strike. Iranian cities have been bombed. The Natanz enrichment facility has been hit, again, with bunker-busting munitions. The incentive structure for restraint has been systematically dismantled, decision by decision, strike by strike. What does a government do when it has already absorbed what should have been red lines? When the other side has already crossed every threshold you warned them not to cross, it recalculates. And that recalculation is what the world is now watching in real time. The economic signals are reading the fear clearly. Oil climbed past $118 a barrel. The Strait of Hormuz, the narrow channel through which roughly 20% of the world's oil supply passes, has become effectively impassable for Western shipping. Qatar declared force majeure on LNG exports. Kuwait halted oil production entirely. Every day this continues, the global economy absorbs another shock on top of the last one. But none of that is the real stakes. The real stakes are this. For decades, the Middle East has operated under a specific kind of terrible stability. Israel had nuclear weapons nobody acknowledged. Iran was pursuing a program everyone monitored. Both sides understood implicitly that there was a floor to this conflict, a level of escalation that nobody would cross because the consequences were too catastrophic to contemplate. That floor just developed a crack. The IAEA's Director General Rafael Grossi said it clearly after the Dimona strikes. Maximum military restraint should be observed, in particular in the vicinity of nuclear facilities. That's diplomatic language for something that doesn't have polite words. If the wrong missile hits the wrong building, we are in territory that international law, military doctrine, and crisis management protocols have never actually been tested against. A strike on a nuclear reactor isn't a military victory. It's a radiological event. Plutonium doesn't respect borders. Contamination doesn't stop at a ceasefire line. The wind doesn't care about peace negotiations. Nobody in this conflict wants that outcome, almost certainly. But wanting to avoid something and having the precision and control to actually avoid it, especially in the middle of a shooting war, with hypersonic missiles traveling at Mach 13 and air defense systems operating at the edge of their physical limits, are two very different things. Here's what nobody is saying loudly enough. Israel's policy of nuclear ambiguity, the deliberate strategy of neither confirming nor denying its arsenal, in place since the late 1960s, was designed for a world where the weapons were a deterrent precisely because their existence couldn't be openly challenged. The moment an adversary demonstrates it can reach the facility where those weapons live, the ambiguity doesn't vanish, but it weakens. Deterrence is psychological. And the psychology just shifted. Netanyahu visited Arad the morning after the strikes. He stood near the rubble, promised to continue the campaign against Iran, and called the evening difficult. Israeli forces struck a research and development facility at Tehran's Malik Ashtar University the same day, saying it had been used to develop nuclear weapons components and ballistic missiles. The cycle accelerated. And so here's the question that nobody in Washington or Jerusalem is answering publicly. What is the endgame? A war that began with the stated goal of regime change and nuclear disarmament has produced, in 4 weeks, strikes on nuclear facilities on both sides, a Middle East energy crisis, 4,500 Israelis hospitalized, over 1,500 Iranians killed, including at least 200 children according to Iranian state figures, and a missile landing 14 kilometers from the most sensitive nuclear site in the region. The people of Dimona are sleeping, or trying to. 10 kilometers from a reactor that the world just watched get used as a target reference. A woman whose supermarket was destroyed in the blast said, When we left the bomb shelter, everything was destroyed. A contractor standing in a crater next to the remains of his house said he didn't feel threatened. Had faith. That's what it looks like from the inside of history when it's happening. Not like a turning point. Like another night. Another siren. Another shelter. Another morning where you walk out and try to rebuild because what else do you do? The analysts and the defense ministers and the arms control experts are the ones using words like nuclear threshold and escalation dominance and deterrence collapse. The people in Dimona are just trying to get their doors to close again. Both things are true simultaneously. The everyday human reality and the systemic global risk. And the gap between those two realities, the gap between a man with a rifle standing in his ruined home, saying, "I have faith," and a world that is watching two nuclear-linked states strike each other's nuclear infrastructure in real time. That gap is exactly where catastrophic miscalculations live. The floor is still there. For now. The question this war is answering in real time is how much weight it can hold.